We would like to thank everyone that you attend the FMRI, Frame Mobility Research Institute webinars. And it's our pleasure today to have Dr. Miguel Figliozzi for Portland State University to be one of our speakers. Miguel is a professor in Portland State University, Civil Environmental Engineering Department, and he is leading transportation technology and people research group at Portland State University, and he would like to push his research ideas further and help expand with his group analytical policy skills in different areas. Dr. Figliozzi publications research areas include transit, traffic operations, emissions, air quality, freight, supply chains, and logistics. He collaborates with the local, state, and federal agencies and enjoy participating in multidisciplinary teams. And actually, we are really lucky, honored to have Dr. Figliozzi as a part of the consortium member of the FMRI. Dr. Figliozzi is a member of the Transportation Research Board, different committees such as Network Modeling Committee, Freight and Logistics Committee, the Model Terminal Design Committee that I think now he probably moved to the different committee because it's not any longer anymore. And he's also a member of Informal Transportation Logistics Society. And we are looking forward for his presentation that always we enjoyed his talk. And today he's going to talk about an important topic that we are interested before and during the coronavirus times. Last mile delivery innovations. And Miguel, thank you. And the talk is yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Evangelos, for the presentation and this opportunity to talk to all of you. I'm just going to start with the kind of a general overview about where we are and trends in the industry, and then I'll move on to last mile innovations. So could you pass to the next slide, please? Okay, just to provide some context, I know that now, July 2020, it's a different time as issues related to COVID. But just to kind of remind you, like 5 months ago,
Welcome to WebEx. Enter your access code or meeting number followed by pound. Enter your attendee ID number followed by pound.
Okay, Aline?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay, okay. So I was just trying to say that 5 months ago, everybody was kind of talking about the China trade war, Brexit, and so many things. And it seemed like it has been like 10 years ago, but it was actually 5 months ago. But before COVID, we have, some pretty strong trends regarding e-commerce and also the growth of the package delivery industry. And if you can move to the next slide, please. And so e-commerce has been growing roughly at, a double-digit rate for the last 10 years, even longer. And, this is one graph just showing an example on in terms of Amazon, that is kind of the largest player in terms of e-commerce, how it's growing. You see like a steady growth, not only on the sales, online sales, but also in terms of the subscription to Prime membership. That is a key driver for package deliveries and online shopping. Please move to the next one. So that's kind of overall in terms of e-commerce trends. But if we go to just thinking specifically about packages, there was, looking at 2015 to 2019, the clear growth in terms of the deliveries of the major kind of players like the Postal Service, UPS, Fedex, And this slide here doesn't include the, the packages that Amazon is now delivering on its own, using its own network. So you see that it's a, very clear upward trend regarding sales and also package deliveries. Next one, please. So now we are in the kind of COVID era, and this is, a very kind of different type of environment. And I'm gonna, be kind of talking a bit about COVID because it kind of relates to the innovations in last mile delivery, because there have been a, an increased, e-commerce was growing very fast, but as I'm going to discuss in the next slides, the pace of growth has accelerated significantly. And the other thing that obviously there have been, especially at the beginning, some dramatic changes in demand patterns, some type of products, services were, increasing very rapidly, and supply chains have to be realigned, and things have, kind of starting to look a bit, somewhat more normal, but of course it's just kind of adapting to a new normal, not the normal we had before. Please, the next one. So just to give you some numbers that it's kind of forecasted that, overall this year, and again, this is a forecast, online sales will increase at least 18%, and, brick and mortar traditional sales will decrease around 14-15%. Again, this is a forecast. We're still, half the year, on 2020, but some numbers regarding April, May, for example, that online sales are over the 2019 holiday peak by around 8%, 7%. So it's a quite significant increase because, the online season, November, December are, very busy months in terms of sales and freight movement. And just to compare it with the April, May 2019, it's around 50% increase, again, in terms of online sales. So you see that there have been a huge, change in terms of the pace of e-commerce and online sales adoptions. Yeah. Next one, please. Just to give you some numbers, even this is data from the first quarter of 2020, and some numbers, Walmart, for example, showed an increase 74% in its e-commerce sales. And again, this is kind of partially capturing some of the COVID impact. And, Walmart was starting from a kind of lower kind of base, but again, it's kind of significant number. And obviously, when we have the numbers for the second quarter, they are likely to be much more dramatic than these ones. And Amazon posted a, an increase to significant one, 24%, just looking at the first quarter. Again, that's up to March, the end of March. Next one, please. One segment that has seen a lot of growth, and actually this is the fastest growing category in e-commerce, is food and grocery delivery. So, for example, one case is Instacart. That's one of the, the largest player in this area. Saw a 500% growth in April over April 2019. And you can see that, this kind of growth, it sounds amazing, but I think, many of these companies have been, dealing with capacity issues, and they have to kind of hire. In this case, for example, they went from 150,000 shoppers pre-COVID to over 500,000 shoppers in April. So you see that, to accommodate this growth, it requires kind of dramatic changes in the capacity and infrastructure that these companies have to, provide in order to meet this huge increase. So overall, not just talking about Instacart, but in this segment, the growth was 300% growth. Comparing, April 2020 versus April 2019. Please, next one. So I was talking a little bit about these issues regarding the workforce and this dramatic increase in number of workers. And, Amazon also had to, increase, by 175,000 at least workers to deal with this kind of surge in demand. So basically, as I was, reading lately, they're saying, well, it's kind of dealing with the Christmas peak without having, notice, and just having to deal with this huge change in demand without being prepared for that. So to attract more workers and to keep, better working relations, there was some increase in terms of from 15 to 17 per hour. Just to kind of, in terms of, there was a lot of media discussion about hazard pay and the risk that these workers are, facing. And despite all these, efforts in terms of to increase pay, there have been, labor unrest at, Instacart and Amazon, especially at the warehouses. So that the issue about labor and safety has been clearly a problem that these companies had to face, not just increasing demand and how to increase capacity, but also how to keep a labor force healthy and engaged and happy in a way. Next one, please. So just recapping a little bit. So in terms of last mile, we see that COVID has obviously had a huge impact. Not only just looking at package, parcel, service, deliveries growth, but also in terms of health risks and labor issues, capacity challenges, and on top of that, as many of you may know, the U.S. Postal Service, is facing, some financial issues in terms of Congress has to deal with. And obviously, it's not clear what's going to happen with the U.S. Postal Service in the future. But, in terms of this kind of fast-growing industry, there could be also another potential issue if, there are problems related to the Postal Service. Next one, please. So now I'm going to move a little bit to discuss some of the kind of technologies that can be, provide some innovation in the last mile. I'm going to talk a little bit about the characteristics of these vehicles, these technologies, and later I'm going to talk about some potential drawbacks and some issues that still remain. And finally, I'll wrap up the presentation just discussing future trends. So when we talk about autonomous vehicles, we are talking, in one part, it could be about ground delivery vehicles, could be delivery robots like the ones you saw here in the screen. So basically, they deliver items to customers. There is no person involved. And I guess this is why this type of technology has, there have been renewed interest in looking at this type of vehicles, because obviously, thinking about the pandemic, they are very appealing in terms of reducing contact between people, and they can travel on sidewalks or on roads. And you see that they have very, very different capabilities in terms of potential payload, speed, and range. Just to get a sense, you see that, the Starship, the one that vehicle that gets most of the attention, at least in the kind of sidewalk delivery robots, you see that are fairly small compared to the ones that have been proposed to travel the roads. And they have very different capabilities. And we'll discuss a little bit more about them in a later slide. Next one, please. So for the small delivery robots that can travel on the sidewalk, because they are so limited in terms of range, typically 3 to 4 miles, they have been also, in a way, proposed to be kind of carried by a mothership if they have to travel longer distances. So obviously, this kind of mothership, this kind of van that has been adapted to carry these, eight of these smaller robots, is human-driven. But there is the additional cost of just having now, in this case, for longer distances from the depot, to have not only the small robot, but also you need to have a delivery van that can transport the robots and a driver. Yeah. Next one, please. So going back a bit to COVID, in Asia, where COVID started first, the lockdown had sparked several innovations. The robotic companies and JD have been testing different type of robot delivery vehicles to service retailers, hospitals, malls, and even apartment complexes. So there have been a lot of this kind of type of news and photos and videos showing that all the applications that are already taking place in China and South Korea, for example. Next one, please. So in the US, the same has happened. There have been some testing, for example, in California to move food supplies and medical equipment between facilities without having any person, involved in driving these vehicles. Next one, please. And the same in the Mayo Clinic in Florida. Just in this case, it's not a delivery vehicle per se, but it's the Navia is the minibus that has been repurposed to travel between facilities and take viral tests and supplies without human intervention. Yeah. Next one, please. But of course, this is a very fast changing landscape, and like they have been, pretty much every month there is some new vehicle or some new company that is trying to get into this type of technology, and just showing some examples here from FedEx, Amazon, Postmates, and the one that is kind of a bit more interesting is the one that FedEx had proposed, because unlike the other vehicles, it's a bit bigger, has a longer range, up to 8 miles. It can carry 100 pounds of payload, and more importantly, it has been designed in a way that it can climb stairs. Yeah, so in many, to reach many houses, porches, and delivery locations, it's necessary to, go over obstacles like stairs that, many of the other vehicles will not be able to, face successfully. So it's kind of important to recognize that when we think about the last mile, is not always using, smooth surfaces and without obstacles, that in the real world, there are many, many potential problems that can delay or stop the smaller or simpler delivery robots from reaching the delivery destination. Next one, please. I'll talk a little bit about the regulatory side, and there is no federal or national kind of regulation for the delivery robots that travel on sidewalks. But just kind of a summary of some of the regulations. Typical regulations are for the sidewalks, they limit the weight limit to 80 pounds, the speed to 10 miles per hour. They require that these robots should successfully follow pedestrian laws, should have proper insurance, headlights, brakes. In many cases, they also require that they have to emit sound to alert pedestrians or pets or anyone else that is kind of using the sidewalk of their presence. Next one, please. But just to go back to, there is a wide range of regulations, and San Francisco is one of the most strict in terms of regulatory framework, and other places like Arizona, Phoenix are the ones that tend to be more loose in terms of regulation. Regarding the road autonomous delivery vehicle robots, the regulation is somewhat similar to what can be applied to autonomous vehicles because they're on the road. And obviously insurance policy is very important. There must be an operator that must have a valid driver license, and they should be constantly monitored, and there is a manual override feature in case there is a problem. Yeah. Next one, please. I'm also going to discuss a little bit about drones. In this case, are delivery vehicles, but of course, instead of on the ground, they are flying, and there is a wide range of aircrafts in this case. But the main characteristics are basically, when we talk about multicopters versus fixed wing drones have a much better performance in terms of energy consumption, range, and payload. Though the problem is that they are much bigger, and in terms of urban deliveries, they are likely to face many more obstacles in terms of power lines or obstacles in terms of in the air, trees, and other type of obstacles. Multicopters tend to be more agile in terms of vertical takeoff and landing, and potentially can sort and face obstacles that can be found in many cities. The other thing that is very important is the issue about the engine. These type of vehicles tend to be noisy, so internal combustion engines tend to be even noisier than electric ones. So that's also an important aspect in terms of what can be used to deliver. But the problem with electric is obviously that it reduces the range and the capabilities of the vehicles. Next one, please. So just to give an example about some applications during this time, in North Dakota, there have been successful deliveries that has been authorized by FAA as a testbed in case of carrying medicine and supplies to to the community. So it's something that is already happening, but of course in a very limited way, because there have to be some exceptions from FAA to authorize this type of services. Next one, please. So this slide, I like it in a way because it's useful to put some context in terms of what these vehicles can do. So on the kind of in the first column, we have the vehicles. So the first one is the Starship, is the sidewalk delivery robot. Then the Neuro and the UDelv, two on-road delivery robots. Then we have a drone. Then we have an electric van, and then we have conventional Dodge Ram van. So you see that just looking at the TER, very, very different numbers, from 10 from this drone to 2,100 for the van, just talking about kilograms. The speeds are very, very different, of course. The sidewalk delivery robot is very slow when compared to the other vehicles. And the payload, you see there is a huge difference, especially, what the drone can deliver. In this case, up to 5 kilograms versus the normal kind of payloads, in order of 7 to 1,800 kilograms for the vans. Yeah. So it's very, very different capabilities that if you combine that with the range, you see that the range is very, very different. And especially, the small delivery robots, the cyborg ones, have a very limited range that, can only be deployed near the depot or combining them with the mothership van so they can travel a bit farther. The other kind of on-road delivery robots have a better range, but again, given the cost and capabilities of batteries and the technology right now, they still have some limitations when compared to the conventional or even electric vans. And again, the last column is the energy consumption that, you see that the smaller vehicles tend to be much more efficient in terms of energy consumed per kilometer. Next one, please. So as part of the, our study, we did some analysis in terms of looking at how these vehicles could be deployed and what could be kind of the ideal fleet in different type of circumstances. And in this case, again, there could be many, many scenarios, but just choosing two key variables for deliveries, the density of the number of deliveries, basically how many customers per square mile or square kilometer have to be served, and the other is the depot distance to the service area, and that could be, very close, meaning like the depot in the center of the service area or the depot being far from the service area. And you can see that in terms of thinking about energy emissions, the sidewalk delivery robots could be very, very, have an advantage. Delivery vans have an advantage in terms of emissions and energy consumption. Next slide, please. And when we think about energy emissions, thinking about low density, when we have time constraint results, the previous one was with range constraint. With time constraints, the drone could be the clear winner when we have low density and the distance between the customers and the service and the depot not being too far from the depot. Yeah. Next one, please. But when we see in terms of cost, we see that in many cases, the conventional van still have an advantage in terms of the cost, taking into account operator cost and also the vehicle cost and energy cost. So we're taking all those costs into account, and the conventional van tends to, be the overall winner. But in some cases, for example, the sidewalk delivery robot could be a good competitor. For example, if they are very close to the service area and there is a very high density of customers, basically because they don't have to travel very far and they can service many customers. Next one, please. So if we have time constraints, then again, it changes again because it's not just the range that is constraining the deliveries, but in this case, if time is very important, then the drone again becomes a relevant option, talking about low density and long delivery times. Yeah. Next one, please. So that's kind of a little bit of just kind of showing you that different vehicles may be applicable to different type of settings. So there are many, many type of settings that can be considered, not just density, but also distance, but also willingness to pay from the consumers and the type of product and if they need refrigeration or not, and so on. So that's kind of just a quick overview, but it's not just the vehicle. And when we are thinking about delivering to consumers or companies, it's also important, what some people call the last yard. Yeah. And the last yard could be, just delivering to the porch, to a mailbox, inside the home or the car, or to the locker. Yeah. And again, there is the issue of safety and security becomes important again because it changes significantly from the left to the right in this case. Next one, please. So Amazon has, for example, been, working with this type of Amazon Key deliveries, and some of you may already have this type of service. you could deliver, into a vehicle or into the home. And obviously, this can be done in some cases without any human interaction. But so that's the idea. And again, many companies are kind of working on this concept. And that's one example here, still with the kind of human person delivering the package inside the vehicle. Next one, please. This is a very nice video here. This company, Cleverones, basically, I cannot show you the video because I'm not controlling the presentation, but the key thing is you can go, YouTube has some videos about this, and basically it's a very nice system where it's proposed that the vehicle will drive to a locker and without any human interaction will be able to deliver from some mechanical arms, deposit the packages or products into the locker. The locker will be safely closed and open, and then the customer get notified using an app, and then we'll be able to go and pick up the package. Next one, please. This is kind of in the more business to business, not business to consumer, but there have been also some proposals and some prototypes of systems that they can load and unload trucks just using robots. And again, I cannot show you the video, but it's very interesting, all these potential systems that kind of remove humans from the kind of very last, mile, last yard in terms of actually placing the package or the parcel into the final consumer or the warehouse in this case. Next one, please. So that's all kind of nice, and it looks pretty amazing. But the truth is, and this is what many CEOs from these companies are saying, that technologies are still not ready at the scale to deploy. Yeah, and I have quotes here from a couple of CEOs and founders of these companies that basically they are recognizing that there is a lot of interest now, and this sector is potentially going to grow significantly in the future. But they are saying that at the moment it's not something that can be scaled up quickly and efficiently and everywhere. Next one, please. So I'm just going to start wrapping up the presentation. So I think we are in a moment where things are changing very fast and significantly. And I think one of the key things is like freight and deliveries that in many cases have been perceived in the past as a nuisance or something that have to be reduced or eliminated. For many people now, the perception may have changed, and they might have a more positive view as package deliveries and freight services as something that is essential, and that's something that is very important to support a remote and safe distance kind of lifestyle. I think also in terms of cities and states, I think now they are showing a more willingness to experiment with space and road reallocations, and I think this crisis may have been, a way to trigger kind of rethinking about how the space is being used in urban areas, and that's of course is a very fast evolving landscape. But we'll see what happens in terms of that. In terms of e-commerce, many companies are also rethinking their supply chains and their suppliers and where they locate warehouses and the type of supply chains they have in terms of providing products to customers and businesses. So there is a lot of realignments going on at in the near or midterm in terms of how things are going to look in the future. Next one, please. I just want to also kind of end this saying that the e-commerce growth was a trend that, we have seen in the past. It was growing, double digits. The same thing with package and service delivery, but clearly this COVID-19 pandemic has, accelerated these trends. And I think the trend also regarding automation in deliveries and warehouses, thinking about lockers, all these type of technologies were, being considered and designed and proposed in the past. But I think nowadays, many businesses and many people are rethinking that perhaps this is the way to go in terms of safety, in terms of reducing human interaction, in terms of having safe and more kind of resilient type of system that will not be vulnerable to pandemics or labor issues in the future. So the other thing is the number of vehicles that automated vehicles that are being considered is likely to grow just to cater different segments and different type of industries. It's likely that we'll see a growth in terms of the options, especially to deal with different environments, could be urban versus rural versus suburban, but also with the type of vehicle and the product. So for example, for food and refrigerated products, the vehicles may be different from other products that have less stringent requirements. Next one, please. So just kind of wrapping up, this might have some long-term impacts. We don't know yet what may happen in terms of the share of remote working in the future and how is that going to impact brick and mortar shopping. It's likely that the trend we have seen is going to accelerate, but again, it's very dependent on people's lifestyle and how they're going to react in the long term, not only regarding shopping, but also in terms of employment and residential location and business locations too. Of course, I think there is, in terms of labor and health issues, there are now even more relevant than before, and I think there are even more people thinking about them. And again, this type of contactless technologies are becoming more and more appealing as we see the impact and the disruptions that COVID brought. So finally, I think another long-term impact, and we have seen big changes in terms of traffic and public transportation use, but also ride sharing. And there have been a lot of also talk and discussion about potentially, moving from ride sharing to robot taxis. Again, many people can be concerned about sharing a closed vehicle with a driver and having a robot that can move people around, maybe more appealing for some demographics. And that's kind of closely related to delivery vehicles because they can be considered also robot taxis for packages and goods. So there is potentially longer term impacts that will be clear in the future. But now we're seeing that a lot of talk and a lot of discussion about what may happen. Next one, please. So just want to say very quickly that we have many publications and reports related to this topic, and today I have not been able to cover obviously everything, just give you some kind of highlights and discuss some trends and issues that we consider that are important. Next one, please. I want to acknowledge Dylan has been working with me in many of these papers and the students and colleagues at the TTP lab. And I have to thank also FMRI for supporting these research projects. And next one, please. And I think now you spent over 40 minutes, so happy to answer any questions or anything that comes up. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Figliozzi. It was a great presentation. We will be now taking questions from the audience. You can either talk or send in the chat. I will just stop sharing this. And yes, anyone anyone has any question? You can unmute yourself or write on the chat. Dr. Kaiser, do you have any comments?
A great presentation, Dr. Figliozzi, Miguel. I really appreciate a very interesting topic. I have a couple questions. One question is, do you think that we are in the right way for the last mile delivery? Do you think with these innovative ideas, they are going to minimize any issues that we have, double parking, congestion, and so on?
Thank you, Evangelos. That's a great question. I think for that, the potential is there, but I think the vehicles on their own cannot just do it all. I think that cities will have to also think about how they facilitate the efficient operation of these vehicles, providing a space and making sure that they can operate and access facilities and curb space and road space in a way that is efficient and can compete. Because I think that's going to be moving forward, and if hopefully things go back to normal and there is more traffic and more people moving around, there is also potentially going to be more conflicts in terms of more different type of vehicles and users trying to use the same space. So I think that's also going to be key in terms of providing access so that companies can deploy these vehicles in an efficient way.
Thank you. Thank you, Miguel.
We have a question from Dan Murray. With every city, country, state, and state having the authority to create their own regulations and requirements, how can a national company simultaneously meet all of the disparate standards and make money?
Yeah, that's another great question. I think that's the regulation is one of the biggest challenges, and I think it's in a way, unfortunately, it's a race to the bottom, because companies most likely will adapt to the toughest regulations in the most important markets, like bigger cities, and a lot of the constraints and issues that are being that are being raised in the past, at least in San Francisco and some large cities, they were kind of clearly, hindering the application of these technologies. But in a way, it relates to, to kind of this renewed perception about freight and deliveries as an essential service. And maybe there is a push to kind of facilitate and allow the access of these vehicles in a safe but also efficient way. And I think that's a key trade-off between safety and efficiency, in a way that both can happen at the same time, so that regulators feel that they are in a way protecting the public, but also making sure that they are also allowing and letting these companies operate efficiently. But at the moment, there is no clear framework. There is no clear rules, and each city is basically just doing something different, and that's a significant challenge. But hopefully, it's going to be the growing awareness is going to hopefully allow a smoother transition. I think this COVID-19 is an opportunity to let that happen in a more efficient way. But we'll see. I think it's something very hard to forecast what's going to happen.
Thank you. We have another question from Chloe Jack, which is how do we anticipate changes in design standards for sidewalks as we integrate motorized autonomous vehicles with pedestrians and disabled pedestrians, increase sidewalk widths and right-of-way requirements?
Yeah, thank you. That's another great question. These sidewalks are really, in a way, just from the kind of the perspective of a robot, they are horrible for now, because there are so many obstacles and they are so unpredictable, and there are so many potential things that can stop or not let one of these automated vehicles move around. So that's a very, very big issue, and I think that hopefully this type of reallocation of space in urban areas will allow, in many cases, the expansion of sidewalks and the more widespread use of ramps in many places. Like wheelchair accessible areas are also very beneficial for this type of vehicles, because obviously that anything that can be traveled efficiently by a person using a wheelchair will also mean that this type of sidewalk vehicles can also move in an efficient way. So I think in terms of the technology and the regulation that is in place, these vehicles will likely tend to be safe in the sense that for the sidewalks, they are not too big and they move at relative low speeds, and they are kind of programmed to kind of stop if they see an obstacle or any human being or pet or anything that could be harmed or damaged. But I think the most important issue is for these kind of technologies to work, they need to kind of map the territory and to know they have some clear path without obstacles. And I think that's if that's changing, very fast, in the sense that one day this sidewalk is clear, but next day someone decided to put something there that blocks the path. Obviously, that type of things is going to create problems for this type of vehicles. So I think it's moving forward when cities rethink the regulation for allowing this type of automated technologies to access houses and sidewalks and really deliver to where people want to get their packages. There will have to be some kind of regulation also to make sure that the path of these vehicles is not being obstructed, or they are not being in a way that anyone can just change, just to think in a way as the sidewalk as a kind of roadway, but obviously thinking that pedestrians and cyclists and many other users also have the priority too. And I think that's it's going to be a very complex, I think, challenge in terms of how to provide the guidelines that can meet the goals and the needs of all the users.
Thank you. I have another question from John Brenner. He's sending his greetings. Good to hear you talk and reconnect. He's curious to get your thoughts on federal regulation and financing. On the one hand, the private companies do not want regulation, but on the other hand, the National Highway Trust Fund and state trust funds, gas taxes, is running out of money. Do you have thoughts on how companies can promote less regulation but at the same time ask for the government to pay for transportation infrastructure?
Thank you, John. Great question. Great to see you here in this webinar. Yeah, that's a great question, and I think I think this issue goes back a lot to electrification, and many of these autonomous technologies are associated to electric engines, and obviously anything that is electric is not paying for the gas tax, and that's the traditional main source of funding for many transportation projects. And I think this is part of the kind of a much bigger conversation about how to pay for transportation, because I think the traditional ways of paying, just using the gas tax, is not going to be efficient or sufficient in the future. So I think that, again, I don't think I can answer this one properly, but my thinking is we need to move away from the current system towards something that makes sure that is providing funding based on how infrastructure is being used and what infrastructure may be needed by the different type of users, and also how is that going to move in the future, so that anything that is electric also pays its fair share in terms of using the infrastructure. At the same time, electric engines have a lot of benefits in terms of pollution and noise, and reducing the environmental burden of transportation. So I think it's something that has to happen, I think, at the bigger, bigger than just freight and deliveries. I think it's something that has to happen at the federal level. And but again, it's somehow outside my area of expertise. But I think the only thing I can say is the current system doesn't seem to be sustainable or even fair or efficient in terms of regarding funding and providing new infrastructure.
I have two more questions here. One is from Dem Liu. She said it's a very informative presentation. Could you explain a little bit more about the choice of ideal vehicle fleets? How comes out this result? And what kind of method do you use? And do you develop optimization objectives?
Yeah, thank you, Dan. So what I presented, it was just very, very kind of high-level results. And basically, we're just looking at how many miles or how many kilometers different type of vehicles need to travel to deliver to different type of customers in different settings. So basically, emissions are closely related to distance travel and type of vehicle. So from that, there is kind of, obviously there are many assumptions. This is kind of very, optimized kind of optimization, but, making a lot of assumptions and simplifications, but in a way try to get the high level view about what type of vehicle may be more efficient in what type of circumstance. And the same thing regarding cost. And I think it's in terms of costs is even more uncertain, because the price and the cost of these autonomous vehicles are changing very fast. They are becoming more efficient, and the cost is being, is going down. So it's also very hard to provide accurate, exact numbers. And we were just using, in many cases, manufacturer or kind of startup companies kind of estimates of their cost, and maybe having different scenarios in terms of saying, well, is an optimistic or pessimistic scenario, and then trying to play with the cost variables. But the key thing is there is there is a lot of uncertainty in terms about how costs are going to what type of costs I want to see in the future, and it relates to previous questions in terms of what type of infrastructure and what's going to happen at the last mile and the last yard in terms of how efficient is going to be the delivery. So time is one of the key inputs, and is it going to take 2 or 3 minutes for a vehicle to reach a customer, or is going to take 10, 20 seconds to access the house because the infrastructure is there to make it efficient. So that type of time difference, when you think about routes where vehicles could potentially deliver to 50, 100 customers, all those minutes add up and make a big difference in terms of efficiency. So it's there is a lot that depends on not just the vehicle, not just the cost of the technology, but also in terms of the regulation and how the vehicles can access customers.
Thank you. I have one more questions about from Amanda. Thanks for lots of interesting insights on these innovations. A question about the acceptance and behavior among customer, receivers, and e-buyers. You showed how demand for e-commerce has increased during the pandemic, but as a follow-up, does that translate into more acceptance for cutting-edge non-contact delivery modes? And what do we know about the population segments that will more readily accept to use and pay for these innovations, and what they care about: reliability of technology, environmental impact, that is safe from contaminants, damage, security, theft of goods, etc.?
Okay, thank you. And it's a great question. And I just bring in kind of the consumer side. And we just completed a survey, and we're analyzing some results about in the Portland area, customers, household purchases before COVID and during COVID in terms of e-commerce and online, deliveries of packages and so on. And just from what we are seeing, and again, these are kind of, we are kind of in the process of analyzing the data, but we are seeing that, for example, regarding health, there is a very significant correlation between income levels and health concerns. So we tend to see, for example, that the households that really have increased significantly the amount of e-commerce and package deliveries tend to be the wealthier, more educated, and the households that, they are also correlated with high levels of concern regarding safety and issues related to COVID-19. So that's what we are seeing. But again, that's what we are seeing now. But again, we don't know towards the future what's going to happen. But for sure, I think in terms of equity and how these things may play out in the future, it's not going to be adopted, or I think not everybody's going to be at the same level of adoption. We see, like previous research have found, in terms of also number of hours people spend with computers and cell phones and deliveries, having subscription to delivery services have a huge impact on the number of package deliveries they receive. So, we're still looking at the data, but I think the answer I can give you now is that safety is a big concern, and health issues, but it does depend a lot on the type of household and the type of education and occupation and the income level that different households have. So that's what I can tell you right now. But like I said, we are kind of looking into that. It's a very important issue. Thank you.